Welcome everyone! You ever look at a tiny startup and wonder how in the world they're able to compete with a global giant? Well, a lot of the time, the secret sauce is the cloud. In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on cloud computing, using Microsoft Azure as our guide so you can really get a handle on the fundamentals that are completely changing the game. So let's start with that exact puzzle. Picture a small IT firm. They've got this amazing, world-changing idea, but to make it happen, they need to go global. The problem? They're hitting a wall. They need more servers, more office space, more staff, and a whole lot of cash they just don't have. So how can they possibly keep up? The answer, it turns out, is a totally different way of thinking about technology.
So first up, let's talk about why the cloud is even a thing. And to do that, we have to look at the old way of doing things, the challenges of what we call traditional IT. For any business trying to grow, the financial hurdles were just massive.
And this right here perfectly sums up those hurdles. On one side, you've got capital expenditure, or CapEx. Think of this as the giant one-time check you have to write to buy a bunch of physical servers and build out a data center. Then, on the other side, you have operational expenditure, or OpEx. These are the bills that keep coming, month after month: electricity, cooling, maintenance. For a business that's trying to grow, you want to keep both of these as low as possible, and this is exactly where the cloud just flips the whole script.
This quote right here gets to the absolute heart of it. It's a simple idea, but it's revolutionary. Instead of buying and owning all your computers and servers, you just rent what you need over the internet. And that simple shift is the real game changer. It takes that huge, scary upfront CapEx and turns it into a much more manageable pay-as-you-go OpEx cost.
Okay, so if you're renting hardware, what are your options? What does that even look like? Well, let's break down the different cloud service models. It's really all about deciding how much control you want to have versus how much you want the cloud provider, like Microsoft, to handle for you.
This is what's known as the shared responsibility model, and it's a super important concept to get your head around. Imagine the old way, on-premises, is like owning your own house. You're responsible for everything, from fixing the foundation to patching the roof. As you move into the cloud, you're basically shifting from owning to renting. Your landlord, in this case Microsoft, starts taking care of more and more of the underlying maintenance, and that frees you up to focus on the things that actually matter to your business, your applications, and your data.
So, first up, we have Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS. Sticking with our house analogy, this is kind of like renting the land and the basic structure. The foundation is solid, the walls are up, but you get to decide everything else: the layout, the paint colors, the furniture. In the tech world, that means you're choosing the operating system, you're installing your own applications, you get a ton of control, but you don't have to worry about the physical building itself.
Next up is Platform as a Service, or PaaS. Now, the cloud provider does even more of the heavy lifting. They're not just managing the physical building, they're also taking care of the plumbing and the electrical. That's the operating system, the security updates, the patching. All you have to do is show up with your stuff, your application code, and move it in. This is an absolute dream for developers because they can just focus on writing great code, not managing servers.
And finally, we have Software as a Service, or SaaS. You're almost definitely using this every single day. We're talking about things like Gmail or Microsoft 365. With SaaS, you don't manage anything, not the hardware, not the OS, not the app code. You just subscribe and use the software. It's the ultimate "it just works" model.
Okay, so now that we've got the service models down, let's actually peek inside Azure and look at the core building blocks. Pretty much everything you build in the cloud is made up of services from these three main categories.
First up is compute. You can think of this as the engine or the brains of your whole cloud setup. This is the raw processing power that actually runs your code and makes your applications work, whether it's a simple website or some really complex data analysis.
Now, in Azure, you've got a few different ways to get that compute power. You can spin up virtual machines, which is that IaaS approach we talked about, giving you total control. Or you could use something like App Service, which is a PaaS offering that makes it super easy to host web apps. And then you've got cool stuff like Azure Functions, which is serverless, meaning you only pay for the tiny fractions of a second that your code is actually running. Pretty neat.
All right, so every application needs a place to keep its stuff, right? That's where Azure Storage comes in. And it's not just one thing. It's a whole suite of services designed for all the different kinds of data you might have.
And picking the right storage is really, really important. For example, blob storage is perfect for what we call unstructured data. Think images, videos, audio files.
Disk storage is basically a virtual hard drive that you attach to your virtual machines. And then you have file storage, which acts like a shared network drive in the cloud that multiple machines can access at the same time.
And finally, having all this compute power and storage is great, but it's pretty useless if none of it can talk to each other or the outside world. That's what Azure networking is all about. It lets you build your own private, secure network in the cloud and control exactly how traffic flows in and out.
So, with Azure, you can create something called a virtual network, or a VNet. It's just like having your own private local network at your office, but it's all in the cloud. Then, you can use network security groups. Think of them as a smart firewall to set up rules about what traffic is allowed. And if you need a secure, encrypted tunnel from your cloud network back to your physical office, that's what a VPN gateway is for.
So, having all these incredibly powerful services is fantastic, but let's be real. Without a good plan, things can get really messy and, even worse, insecure. So let's talk about how Azure helps you keep everything organized and safe.
This diagram really breaks down the whole Azure hierarchy. Think of it like a set of nested folders. At the very top, you have management groups to organize big parts of your company, like marketing and engineering. Underneath those, you have subscriptions, which are mainly for billing. Then, inside a subscription, you create resource groups to hold all the related services for a single application. And finally, at the bottom, you have the actual resources themselves, the VMs, the databases, and so on. The key takeaway here is that permissions and policies flow from the top down.
Okay, let's clear up something that trips a lot of people up, the difference between Azure RBAC and Azure AD roles. Here's the easiest way to think about it. Azure RBAC is like the key to a specific room inside a building. It controls what you can do in that room. Can you turn on the lights? Can you move the furniture? Azure AD roles, on the other hand, are like your main ID badge for the entire building. It just proves who you are and whether you're even allowed inside in the first place. So one is for resources, the other is for your identity.
All right, we've covered the what and the how, so now let's get to the most important part, the why. What's the real, big-picture payoff of moving to the cloud? Well, it all boils down to a few incredible advantages that old-school IT just can't compete with.
First, there's scalability. That's the magic ability to automatically add more power when you get busy and then scale back down when things are quiet. Then you have high availability, which is about building systems that are resilient. So if one part fails, another one just takes over instantly with no downtime. And of course, cost-effectiveness. We're back to that pay-for-what-you-use model, which means you stop wasting money on servers that are just sitting there doing nothing.
You're going to see numbers like this thrown around all the time when you're dealing with the cloud. But what does a number like 99.99% actually mean? This is called a service level agreement, or an SLA. It's basically a promise, a guarantee from the cloud provider about how much uptime you can expect. It's a really powerful way to measure reliability. So let's put that number into real-world terms. An SLA of 4 nines, or 99.99%, means you can expect at most about 4 minutes of downtime in an entire month. Now think about that. For a small business to try and achieve that level of reliability on their own would be unbelievably expensive and complicated. In the cloud, it's just a built-in feature you can count on. So when you put it all together, the cloud really is the great equalizer. It gives small startups and even individual developers access to the same powerful, scalable, and super reliable technology that used to be only for the biggest corporations in the world. You know, in a way, it gives you technological superpowers. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build with them?